Hey everyone, and you're on Neoncast 6. I'm Neon Taster, and this is the Neoncast. Gonna be a bit of a weird show this week, I think, because I really didn't have that much to talk about. Not much going on. It's kind of a dry spell. I'm guessing it's a little bit of like one of those pauses between like bulks of news and shit. So like not much is going on. I was going to do this on Friday. This is now Sunday. And I couldn't really think of anything. I still can't, but I think I should do this anyway. So I'm just going to talk for a while and see what happens. Went to see Deadpool again this weekend. And it's still great. Really works well the second time. I went to see it at the Alamo Draft House. I'm gonna be really late to the party. I figured I might talk about the Alamo a little, but then I was like, people mostly know it by now. I mean, I'm really late to this party, so I feel like I would be really kind of weird just being like, when we went there and they had this thing and they had that thing, like some starry-eyed bumpkin, from the village going to the big city of the Alamo. But yeah, the thing that I took away from that experience, and I guess if you don't know, it's like a theater that has food and booze, and I think you can't go there if you're under 18 or under 21 or whatever, and they do lots of events and stuff. They don't just do first string movies. They'll play old movies. They'll do all kinds of events and stuff. But yeah, it was basically like theater seating, but it has like little tables and there's little aisles that the servers can go through and bring you like drinks and food and stuff. And the thing that I took away from it is I'm surprised there aren't more of these. I mean, you're trying, like the movie industry is trying really hard to get people out of their houses and watch movies, because people have good TVs and they got good sound systems and they got lots and lots of options and all these like streaming services. You got like a million, like you have a gigantic library of stuff you could just pop in at any time. So the movie industry and the theater industry in general are trying to figure out ways to get you out of your house and into a theater. And I think this is a really good way of doing that. It's just a fun time. I would even recommend it as a good way to see a movie the second time. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you can go watch a movie the first time like that, but like you're having stuff ordered and you can have a fucking pizza there or whatever. Maybe not paying 100% attention to the movie. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure people go watch movies there the first time all the time. But as a way to watch a movie that I already did watch, so that if I missed a line of dialogue writing down my order or something, then that's not the end of the world. It was actually a really cool experience. And like I said, really works well the second time as well. And I think talking a little bit about Deadpool is going to play into a little bit more of what I was going to talk about this week. Yeah, I mean, as I said, not too much going on. I've been watching a few movies, just trying to catch up on some stuff that I missed. For instance, I watched recently Zero Dark 30 for the main purpose of which was that a bunch of the technical staff from it, like the cinematographer, the DP, the guy who wrote the music, are all working on Star Wars Rogue One, which for some reason is now called Rogue One, a Star Wars story or something like that, which I think is not as good a title as Star Wars Rogue One, but could indicate that they're trying to push it a little farther away from like being like a classic Star Wars movie. I had a discussion with a friend of mine about whether or not they're going to open it, in the same way that they open what I guess we're going to just call legacy movies now. These are called anthology movies. So I guess like episode 8, episode 9 are like legacy movies, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, that kind of stuff. Like, will it start like that, or will they go a different way? I mean, like I said, John Williams is not scoring this movie. It's being scored by, I can't remember the guy's name. He did Rogue One and a bunch of the cinematographers and stuff, trying to make it like a war movie, which I think is a really good idea. And I said to myself, I haven't seen Rogue One. I haven't seen Zero Dark 30 yet. I might as well pop it in and kind of see what the deal is. And I mean, it's a good movie, whatever, not too much to talk about in the context of this podcast, but interestingly enough, a teaser for episode 8 came out. It's not really a teaser. I mean, it was just like, oh, we started filming. Here's a little thing just to let you know that we started filming, and a little teeny bit of footage, which now means that there's more footage out there from episode 8 than there is from Rogue One. Rogue One's coming out this December. Episode 8's coming out next December. So they're keeping it close to the chest. I tell that the first trailer is supposed to hit with Civil War, but that's May 1st. That's like 6 months before the movie hits. That would be very odd if that's of like the first trailer we see, unless they have like a teaser lined up to premiere sometime before that. Having your thing come out the first weekend of May when your movie's coming out the first week of December or the second week of December is a little weird to me, and maybe a little risky even, because this is I mean, I'm sure this movie's gonna make bank, but it's less of a, it's not like, look, it's Luke Skywalker and Leia and you know, it's not Star Wars. It's a Star Wars movie, but it's not the Star Wars movies. So I would have expected them to push the marketing for this more than they would the legacy movies, not less. But also an interesting notion. Like, I don't know what's gonna happen with this, but I don't know. I'm really curious, and I'm very confused and very sort of I'm scratching my head as to why there's almost nothing out from this movie at all. Back to the issue of Deadpool, which I guess I'm going to try and use to like springboard into whatever I was going to talk about. So Deadpool made just incredible amounts of money. As I mentioned last week, I don't know if I can't remember what day I had recorded the podcast last weekend, but it made, I think, something like over $150 million for the 4-day weekend, because it was President's Day, and over 250 worldwide, like a 260 million opening weekend, biggest R-rated opening weekend of all time, and immediately spurred a lot of debate about what's going to be next, like what's going to happen now, because everyone was saying like, oh, this is going to have a Dark Knight type effect. Like every once in a while, a movie comes along that kind of shifts the paradigm of everything that's being done, because it makes a lot of money. It's very acclaimed. And The Dark Knight was definitely a movie like that. The first Bourne movie, also very much like that, kind of changed the way everyone else was looking at the projects that they had lined up in the future in terms of their style, in terms of their marketing. Guardians of the Galaxy also did that a lot in terms of how you market movies now, and you kind of try to play up that whole like attitude of your movie, because Guardians is very character driven, and it had that whole trailer with the, you know, like an old pop song. Suicide Squad news trailer with Bohemian Rhapsody, very much a derivative of that. Also, the Star Trek Beyond trailer that had Sabotage by the Beastie Boys playing in the background, which does tie into the 2009 Star Trek, because that movie's in that song is in the soundtrack to that movie, because Kirk steals a car as a kid and he's driving down whatever Iowa or wherever he is, and that song's playing on the car radio. But still, it's definitely a result of that. Deadpool also has a lot of that kind of stuff going on with like weird, like sort of famous pop songs or whatever. But so there's all this discussion. What's going to happen now? What are people going to do? How is this going to influence I called it the Deadpool effect. The first piece of news that came out was that Wolverine 3 is going to be R-rated. And people said, I even said like, Deadpool. Apparently this has been in planning even before that, but that doesn't mean that the fact that they came out and said this immediately after the Deadpool opening weekend, was a result of that. Was like they wanted to play that up, because the second Wolverine movie has an R cut on the DVD or the Blu-ray, whatever. And I know that like this is a franchise that's always kind of flirted with the idea of being R-rated. I've heard about it a lot. I also the rumors are that they're doing that the third one is going to be Old Man Logan, which is a famous Wolverine storyline. I'm not a comic book guy. I just know a little about it because of my interest in this in like the movies and stuff, and I have friends who are comic book guys and stuff. But yeah, I guess it's like Old Man Logan, basically Wolverine, Old Man, post-apocalyptic world, something like that. Supposedly it's a good story, and they're gonna try and do it R-rated. And like all these this talk about maybe Spawn. I know Todd McFarlane's been sort of hinting at the fact that like a Spawn movie's being considered like another reboot of Spawn. Maybe this is going to be the thing that like lights a fire under the asses of the powers that be to actually get a good Spawn, a good R-rated Spawn movie made. But we'll see. And James Gunn, who made Guardians of the Galaxy, wrote a really good post on Facebook about Deadpool, and about how some people are already learning the wrong lessons from Deadpool and making too narrow. Their conclusions of why it succeeded are too narrow, and saying like, oh, it's because it's R-rated and it's self-referential and no movie has done that before. And James Gunn was like, what are you talking about? Well, first of all, Guardians did that, but I'm obviously he says like I'm obviously biased on that, but like plenty of movies have already done this. Like he said, like, what do you think Iron Man was? What do you think Ant-Man was? Like they were all sort of a little bit irreverent and had an attitude. And he said it's not that. It's that they did something different. They took chances. They went with people who had good artistic voices. And on this podcast already, I spoke about the directors that they have lined up for Star Wars projects. Gareth Edwards, Rian Johnson, Colin Trevorrow. The fact that they hired Ryan Coogler to make Black Panther, the fact that they're going with the Russo brothers to direct Civil War, and then after that, Infinity War. Directors who have proven themselves to do that right, meaning take risks, bring their own voice to it. I mean, initially Edgar Wright was supposed to make Ant-Man, which would have been a really good idea. That fell apart, unfortunately, but that also is because Edgar Wright was a very early hire, and things kind of fell apart in terms of how Ant-Man fit into the world, because Ant-Man's going to be in Civil War, so they had to kind of set that up a little bit in the Ant-Man movie, and I don't think that Edgar Wright was particularly happy about that, but still, the fact that he was considered over some cookie-cutter director who has a way less like strong voice means that their head was in the right place. And now James Gunn's working on Guardians 2. And so he said, like, just, it's not that you want to make another Deadpool. What you want to do is you want to take other franchises and treat them with the same love and care and artistic sort of effort that went into making Deadpool, because it was clearly made. That's the one thing I can say about it. More than anything, it was clearly made by people who love Deadpool, in the same sense that Force Awakens was made by people who love that, who love Star Wars, like deeply love it and care about it. And that's exactly the kind of treatment. Lord of the Rings is a great example. Like Peter Jackson and his production team, Philip, whatever, like he had like three other producers on it. They were like Lord of the Rings fanatics and had a bunch of people who were technical advisors who knew every word and every song and every historical reference that Tolkien put in. That world is expansive, and the mythology is very complex and very well established, and you need to be able to draw on it, even in very minor ways. Like there's, I think George R.R. Martin does this too in A Song of Ice and Fire. Like you make up this whole mythology for your world, and even if you never really get into it, it helps to have that stuff to draw on. Stuff like adages, idioms, little poems, stuff that you never really have to explain where it comes from, but it gives your world that layer of depth where, you know, someone will say something like in A Song of Ice and Fire, like there are all these like sayings in the north, in Westeros, like the northern Westerosi people who have this like history together from before they were part of the Seven Kingdoms, when they were just their own entity, they have this like shared history, and it's expressed in stuff like they have like common heroes, they have common sayings, the North remembers, and words are wind, and stuff like that. Stuff that's mostly unique to the North. And just when people say it to each other in the book and in the show or whatever, it shows that they have this kind of affinity beyond just living in the same country, but like being from like almost like the same ethnic group or the same, like heritage or something like that. So yeah, like Lord of the Rings really feels like it was made by people who love that material. Whereas like The Hobbit to me feels a lot less like that. And it shows. I mean, there's less of a connection with it. And Deadpool, definitely people, made by people who tried to get it done for years and years and years, by an actor who just lobbied and lobbied to play this character because he really wanted to do it. And just that stuff just shines through. I mean, I know that good actors are able to come on set and play something they don't give a shit about and do it well, but there is something there when you can tell that they had fun making it, they wanted to make it, they considered making it a victory, and that kind of love for it is infectious. And I think that's the thing that you got to learn from Deadpool is you need to get the right people on projects, and you need to do them right. There's no need to change stuff that's already good. Like Deadpool is popular because it's Deadpool, not because of the name Deadpool. It's not that people will hear that there's a Deadpool movie and because they know that thing exists, they'll go see it. That's that whole like everything in Hollywood now is a remake or a reboot or a sequel or whatever. And a lot of it is based on that name recognition. And there's actually a fairly logical theory behind it, which is that today there's so many alternatives. There's so many options. You can watch Netflix and you can watch streaming stuff. I can watch stuff that's new in Japan, anime that's airing now in Japan, and shows that are airing now in other countries, and movies, old movies, new movies, indie movies that go out on Netflix. There's like direct rentals and kickstarted projects and a million different content providers. And in order to rise above that din, that white noise of so many options, you need something that someone can look at and go like, oh, I know that thing. I've heard of that before. Oh, they're making a movie of that. But that's not the formula to make it successful. I can totally accept, because I'm not one of those people who specifically hate the fact that there's a lot of remakes and reboots. I think they should do whatever they want, just do it good. I don't care that they're doing it. I don't care that there's reboots and remakes. All I want is for them to be good. And so for you to choose to take an existing franchise and make a movie out of it instead of some unknown original franchise is an understandable financial decision, but it's not going to be a good financial decision unless you take that project and you make it well. And the thing that they really need to understand from that is that the reason people recognize the name, the reason people recognize Deadpool, the reason people recognize Ghost in the Shell or Alien or anything is because that thing became popular because it was good, and it was good the way it was. And so sometimes, yes, you need to change some stuff. Sometimes you need to shift things around. Not everything is easily translatable from a comic to a movie or from a book to a movie. That's fine. But you really need that spark, that thing that made this property famous to begin with. Otherwise, you're just banking on a name. You're calling something Coca-Cola, but it's just water. Like the reason Coca-Cola is famous is because people like the way it tastes, not the way the name sounds. So if you take something and you sell and you call it Coca-Cola, it needs to taste like Coke. That's why New Coke failed, by the way. I think that I just had an epiphany about New Coke. Because the whole thing about New Coke was it was like, this is Coke. Like it just banked on the name, not on the taste. But the only thing people cared about is the taste. If you change the name of Coke to something else, call it fucking Space Juice, and it still tastes the same, people will still continue to buy it. But if you change the taste and keep the name, you're going to have one of the biggest marketing failures of all time. So it's name recognition is important. It's important to get people in the seats. The way to keep them in the seats and to get them to tell other people to get their asses in your seats is to make it good. And that's Deadpool did that, and it paid off in a huge way. And I just really, really hope that, you know, the post-Deadpool meetings in all of these like boardrooms and centers of decision making understand that and don't not go. I explained this to my friend the other day. I said, when there was the incident of the shoe bomber, there was this guy who had a bomb in his shoe, like an Al-Qaeda guy, and he tried to get a bomb in his shoe on a plane. The thing that then happened was that everybody had to take their shoes off. That was a too narrow of a lesson to learn. It wasn't like the thing that they needed to understand is not, oh, somebody's going to have a bomb in their shoe. It's going to be somebody's going to hide a bomb on them somehow. And you need to figure out an abstract way to catch that. Not, oh, it was a bomb in a shoe. That means from now on, we need to look for bombs in shoes. That's you know what I mean? Like that's the mess. The lesson learned from that was way too narrow in scope. It was the vision that people had about that was way too narrow. And here as well, I'm sure people are going to go like, well, what we need is something that's raunchy and breaks the fourth wall a lot and has a lot of fart jokes, because that's what Deadpool did. And then they're going to just take that and apply it to something that it was never like that to begin with. And it'll be a disaster. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm just saying the same thing over and over basically, but yeah. So, I'm just gonna take a quick sip, and then I'm gonna transition from this to speaking about a movie that I saw this week too. And this is a little related to this because it has to do with, again, strong artistic voices and what they can do with movies. So 1 second and we'll continue. Okay, so as I said, I watched a bunch of movies recently, just trying to catch up on a little bit on stuff that I had missed and hadn't had a chance to watch. And one of the things that I'd watched was a movie called Under the Skin, which is a movie that I heard a little about, mostly in the context of Ex Machina, which is a great movie from last year. But a lot of people said like, oh, if you like Ex Machina, you'll definitely like Under the Skin. And then when all I knew about it was that it was with Scarlett Johansson. There was all this talk about how she was fully nude in it or whatever. That's the only thing I remember hearing about it. But then looking it up, I noticed that it was made by someone whose career I followed on and off for many years, Jonathan Glazer, who's a director that's mostly famous for the music videos that he directed in the 90s. He made a few Radiohead music videos, Karma Police. He made the famous Jamiroquai Virtual Insanity video, the one where he's dancing around in the room and the furniture like moves around the room or whatever. He made a really, really good video called Rabbit in Your Headlights by the band Uncle with Tom York, the singer from Radiohead. And yeah, so he made a couple of movies that made not too much of a stir. One is called Sexy Beast with Ben Kingsley, and the other is a movie called Birth with Nicole Kidman. And that movie's really creepy and kind of disturbing. I actually recommend it. It's a movie about a woman whose husband dies, and then years later she's engaged to some other guy, and she meets this little kid who tells her he's her dead husband reincarnated, and he's like a 10-year-old boy, and it's about their incredibly creepy, disturbing relationship. Definitely a good movie, but then he kind of went away for many years, Glazer, and then he comes back with this movie Under the Skin. Now, it's hard for me to recommend this movie. I like artsy movies, but not entirely. I'll get into it in a second, but this is not the kind of movie that I would recommend to everyone. It has very little dialogue. It has virtually no consequential dialogue, meaning that some people talk in it, but it's mostly you watching two people talking, and their talking is very immaterial to the plot. There is no two characters conducting direct dialogue that advances the story. It's not really that. I guess I'm gonna spoil it a little bit because it's a few years old, but I'll let you know when I get to that part, so that if what I say about it sounds good, you're always welcome to just skip ahead and just go check it out. It's not on Netflix, it's on Amazon Prime. You can watch it. But yeah, it's a weird movie. It has very little dialogue. It's mostly sort of an abstract thing that you got to understand. It has a lot of visual storytelling. They say show don't tell, and this movie does essentially that, and continues in a tradition of other movies that I like a lot that do this, like Upstream Color, the Shane Carruth movie, and a movie called Beyond the Black Rainbow. People always ask me where my Twitter image comes from. It's from a movie called Beyond the Black Rainbow. It's a Canadian science fiction movie that also has virtually no dialogue and is just a series of stunning shots, amazing camera work, and super evocative imagery and music. Low budget movie that just amazing what they managed to do with. I think it cost like $1 million to make. That's all. And if you watch it, you'll see that they really took that budget far by finding interesting places to shoot and just doing stuff that's not super intense in terms of like set design, special effects design, but has all the emotional impact that something like that should have. So like I said, I like artsy movies, but not all artsy movies. I'm not like a film class kind of person who will go and watch like an Ingmar Bergman movie or some kind of artsy movie about like, that has like black and white shots of like Paris in the rain or whatever. For me to like a movie that's artsy like this, it has to have something that I find interesting. It needs to be in the areas of cinema that I find interesting. Stuff like science fiction and mind-bendy psychological horror, and such, So, and this is that. I mean, it's ostensibly, if you read the synopsis of Under the Skin, it's about an alien that goes around picking up people to, I guess, eat them. This doesn't happen in the movie. I mean, it does, but it doesn't. It's shown in a way that I find to be very artistically compelling. And I read a bunch of analyses of this movie after I watched it. And I think that a lot of people who analyzed it took it a little too literally, what they were seeing. But the fascinating thing about this movie is when I was watching it, it felt very documentary-ish, like it was filmed in hidden camera, and then I discovered that in fact it was. And what happened was Scarlett Johansson just drives a panel van around Scotland and tried to pick up random men on the street and get them in her car, and just by asking them for directions and trying to like strike up a conversation and then offer them a ride and get them in her van. And then once that happened, they were then, I guess, presented with the fact that this is a movie and asked if they wanted to participate in it. And if they did, then it was explained to them in great detail what was involved, and they either agreed or not. And some scenes are clearly shot involving people who didn't consent to have their images in it, so you don't see them. You just see her like speaking to someone who's off camera. But just her picking up random people and then sort of dispatching of them, I guess. And like I said, the way it's done is just very, very interesting. And just the way that the details of the story are conveyed in visual ways is, to me, very compelling. I love interesting cinema. Another movie I watched recently was Beasts of No Nation, the Netflix movie with Idris Elba about child soldiers in Africa. And it was made by this guy, Cary Fukunaga, I believe that's the way his name is pronounced. He made True Detective, the show that got a lot of critical acclaim. The first season did. The second season got kind of bashed. But the first season with Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson, and some of the stuff he did on that show was just unbelievable in terms of like just filmmaking. Like I think episode 4 of that show has an entire like 8 or 9 minute sequence that's just done in one shot. And it's very, very extensive, and it goes through a house and then out a house and around in the neighborhood. And it was very, very hard to shoot and compose. And he likes that kind of stuff. Beasts of No Nation also has a couple of very, very long scenes that are done all in one take. I love that stuff. I find it very interesting. And I think I spoke about this before on this podcast too, about how what used to impress audiences in terms of like CGI and you know, stuff that's like, oh, this monster looks very real or that spaceship looks very real, I think now is slowly shifting back to being impressed by stuff that you know they did for real, and just thinking about how hard it was to do that. And I really like that. I really like seeing a scene and seeing it work like clockwork, and all the actors perform perfectly in it in a way that's very, very compelling. And just thinking about how hard it was to get all of that down in one take. So Under the Skin doesn't exactly do that. It does other things that I found to be sort of very artistically impressive. Like I said, the whole concept of it, where it basically involves non-actors. It's Scarlett Johansson and a bunch of random Scottish guys. And for instance, there's a scene in it with, I guess you can skip, although nothing I say here is really going to be a spoiler. It's not really a movie. I'm not going to tell you what happens in the end, obviously, but like, it's not really a movie that you can ruin in that fashion. It's more about the journey, I guess, and seeing how the things look and how it kind of, it has an emotional impact that isn't diminished, I think, by kind of knowing what's going to happen. But even so, this is not going to be a thing that ruins it at all. But at some point she picks up a man who's like deformed. I think he has Elephant Man syndrome, neurofibromatosis or something like that. And it's not prosthetics. They actually specifically went out and found someone through some foundation who had this condition and was willing to be in it and appear in like weirdly like full frontal nudity and stuff. And again, I find that very interesting, just because of how easy it is to not do that, and instead they went that extra mile and they wanted to go for that kind of odd authenticity with it. And yeah, it just has it's very impactful because of that, I thought. And as I said, strong artistic voices to me produce things that are worth watching. Even something like this that's hard to understand, hard to recommend, largely these weird repetitive scenes that don't have too much going on in them, but just done by someone who has a strong sense of how you make stuff. I was talking with someone about this the other day, about how there's certain directors where even if they make a movie that I don't like, it's a good movie. You can tell that it's a good movie. Martin Scorsese is a guy like this. Even Quentin Tarantino, I don't like everything that he does, but even stuff that he does that I find, because to me Tarantino's problem is that, especially lately, he's becoming a little bloated. He's abandoning a little bit of like the sort of the levity and the light atmosphere that his movies had that made them work so well, and now everything he does is very heavy and very sort of bloated, but still every shot is composed well. His dialogue is compelling, and it's still like top-notch filmmaking. I don't like The Wolf of Wall Street, the Scorsese movie. It's still a phenomenally made movie. You know, you're never going to get something that's a subpar product from someone like a Scorsese or a Tarantino or a Nolan. because they have such a strong eye. And so, not every story that they're going to choose to make is going to be appealing to everyone. Not every finished product that they come up with is going to work for everyone. Like, another movie that I recently watched, The Zero Theorem, the newest Terry Gilliam movie. Another director that I like a lot, but don't like everything that he does. And yet it still has really good visuals, really good character performances. It has that Gilliam set and prop design that's just so iconic and just, this movie reminds me a lot of Brazil, which is one of, I think, his best film, and just a terrific film. It's definitely not as good as Brazil, but has a lot of that kind of past future look, kind of retro future ish vibe that I love. And you always get sort of interesting things with Gilliam. The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus and 12 Monkeys and even Time Bandits and stuff like that. He always delivers something that's worth watching. Even if by the end of it you're like, I didn't really like this overall. So as I said, I didn't really have too much to discuss this weekend. I think I might be headed for the end of today's show. I did have a question come in from Nesu Mikuni again on Twitter. That's at Nesu Mikuni, Nesumikuni. And she asked whether or not I was going to comment on the new X-Files episodes. Now, this is going to be a little hard because I only watched the first one, and I did not enjoy it. I hear it gets better. In fairness, I hear it gets better, and I hear it gets a little more Monster of the Weeky, which I think X-Files' strength was kind of in that, even though at the time I was always hoping that they would get back to their story about aliens and stuff. But my impression with the first episode of the X-Files was this, and I'm not going to get into politics because I said I'm not going to get into politics. But I'm going to say this on a non-partisan political basis. I think that a lot of the stuff that made X-Files sexy in the 90s kind of stopped being sexy after 9/11. I think that the whole conspiracy world used to be this sort of exciting and kind of cool thing. I don't know if you remember, but in the original classic X-Files episodes, Mulder had these three friends, who were these like conspiracy buff guys that they would always go to for info. Like, oh, we need to know something about the Nazca lines. Let's go ask these guys. Or, oh, what about the blip? Or what about, like all these like obscure factoids from like that kind of world. And unfortunately, between 9/11, that turned conspiracy theorism into something way more contentious and bitter and something that people don't like. And between that and stuff like Ancient Aliens, which is sort of an exploitative reality show that goes back to like the Fondanican Chariots of the Gods attitude about like ancient aliens and stuff, just took the fun out of that whole world and just made it something that people are more averse to. So when I watched that episode of the X-Files and they're talking about like how the government's hiding free energy because of the oil companies and stuff like that. Whereas once upon a time, that idea would seem kind of cool to me, like, ooh, that's interesting, and a conspiracy or whatever. It just sounds annoying. It's just, I don't know. Like it's not fun anymore, unfortunately. And yes, there is a whole political thing. And yes, I felt that they did politicize it a little too much on a partisan line, but that's not even. I can live with that. I mean, I'm not so petty that I can't go along with something like that if it's not fun. I mean, I there's plenty of stuff that I like from yesteryear that's clearly that's very politically partisan, but is done well enough so that I don't care. Or or care, but can still enjoy it. A movie like Platoon, or a movie like even like Apocalypse Now or Doctor Strangelove. You know, movies that have a very clear political voice that I'm not necessarily I agree with, but it's good enough. The product is good enough so that I can still enjoy it. But yeah, so that first episode of the X-Files just fell very flat for me. I just don't know. Like, I don't know what the others are like. So, you know, I mean, I might watch them eventually, and then I might have a better opinion on this. But yeah, so anyway, that's it for this week. I hope this coming week is going to bring with it some more news and some more maybe stuff that I'm going to have more to say about. I feel like I just babbled this week mostly about not much in particular. I still hope you enjoyed it. And thank you very much for listening and subscribing. And you can find me, as always, at Neon Taster. And you can tweet all of your comments and questions about the podcast to at Neoncast, or send me long form things to neoncastpod at gmail.com. So thank you for listening, if you have been listening. And if not, then why am I talking to you?